We're going to move right along now from talking about what's happening domestically and globally in the oil markets to the global gas markets. And as I mentioned at the outset, we're thrilled that Dr. Tim Boersma has joined the Center on Global Energy Policy, that we were able to persuade him to leave his post at the Brookings Institution, where he headed their energy initiative. Tim's work focuses on global gas markets. He's the author of numerous articles and books about European energy security and European energy policy, gas market and environmental policy, gas market integration, energy diplomacy. He started his career in the private sector in electricity in the Netherlands, and he's going to lead an all-star panel now to talk about the global gas market, and we take the word global quite seriously in our name here. So we have some pioneers who have brought the United States to the rest of the world. A global outlook from Jeroen, the former CEO of Shell, Tatiana, and we'll talk about what's happening in Russia and Europe. And then Chairman Chengyu, I think, will be here any moment, straight off a plane from China. So he'll fill that last chair there momentarily, and I'll turn it over to Tim. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Thank you all for being here. I feel for Chairman Fu, comes off the plane straight into his seat, but we still very much look forward to welcoming here to join our panel, obviously. We got a lot to talk about. Changing global gas markets, changes occurring not in the least because of what's unfolded in this country over the last bit over 15 years or so. And I'm very humbled by my fellow panelists who've just been introduced. So I will not do this again. You will hear very little from me as moderator because I think it'll be much more interesting to hear what my panelists have to say. So I'm going to jump right in. Charif, if it's okay, I'm going to start with you. Please tell us what role you envisage U.S. natural gas is going to play in the global market, in particular, obviously, in the market of LNG.
I think if you look at what happened in the last 7 or 8 years, so we went from a country that was going to import a significant amount of gas to becoming the largest gas producer in the world and soon to be one of the top 2 gas exporters in the world, and then just with a generation of LNG that is now coming to the market. So 2 things are very significant. The first one is that American gas has become very cheap. You heard Scott Sheffield before talking about associated gas and the Northeast gas. The combination of those means that within a very few years, practically all the gas consumed in the United States will have very low cost. And the second thing is that with the liquidity that's being introduced in the market with American LNG and with Australian LNG to supplement the big production from Qatar, you're talking about having 15 cargoes available for sale every day, starting 3 years from today. That's 50 BCF a day of liquid markets. At any given time, you will have 200 cargoes full of LNG on the water somewhere around the world, and you can make a very quick phone call to get that gas to whatever market is in distress for that particular time. It's the equivalent of having 750 BCF of floating storage. So basically, you've broken the point-to-point model, and because of the advent of LNG. In the first phase, we simply removed the destination rigor, if you will, that used to exist in the market. In the second phase, we're going to turn it into a real spot market globally.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. Now, Tatiana, obviously the other global powerhouse in the natural gas world is Russia. Please talk to us about the Gazprom strategy in Europe in particular. Is this a strategy of market share, a strategy of price? How do you see this evolve, and what do you think is going to happen going forward?
Thank you, Tim. Actually, this is a story of 2 powers. What Charif is telling is the American side. Meanwhile, on the Russian side, it was more a story of stagnation, trying to resist the progress, trying to refuse all these modernizations of the contracts, and that actually resulted in stagnation of Russian gas exports for 10 years already, and stagnation and even slight decline in the Russian gas production. It is also accompanied by very complicated struggle in the domestic market between Gazprom, Rosneft, and Novatek. There is increasing competition. Meanwhile, the institutional framework remains very old, outdated from the 1990s, with regulated segment for Gazprom and strict obligations on pricing, regulated pricing, and Really, it's still to a large extent a monopolistic market. So trying to compete with this flexible and liquid development in the global market is really a big challenge. If you add to that lack of financial resources and constraints on the technological development due to the sanctions, it is becoming a really painful story. So with the first LNG glut in 2009-2011, Russia and Gazprom in particular tried to resist, to stay ignorant, to hope for better that it will be absorbed somehow in the next couple of years, which actually happened due to Fukushima, I would say. But basically it was refusing to adapt, or adapting very slow only after the pressure from the buyers was becoming really enormous. Now it seems that Gazprom is changing its strategy, so it starts to be more adaptive, especially with the European antitrust investigation. It has provided quite generous proposals on contractual reviews. So step by step it's moving for spot indexation, it's moving for more flexibility, but it's still not proactive. It is just reacting to the market, and I think that's the major weakness on the Russian side. Mm-hmm. And coming to your question, whether it's price strategy or volume strategy, I would say it's still much more of a price strategy, unfortunately, for Gazprom, which means that it will be hardly able to expand its presence in Europe. It will most likely remain its volumes just due to the existing portfolio of the long-term contracts, which is huge and which guarantees actually the volumes until 2030, but expansion is really highly not very probable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much. Chairman Fu, welcome. We're delighted that you join us. I'm going to be very generous and give you a minute to settle in. Thank you
very much.
Welcome. Jeroen, you've led one of the world's largest IOCs for a substantial period of time. Please tell us how it is that IOCs control a relatively modest share of the world's proven reserves, yet continue to be so prominent in the industry. What's the edge? What do companies need to strive for?
Sorry. I missed that, Tim. What is so prominent? There it goes again. What is so prominent? I missed the question, and it's difficult to hear.
Sorry. So you led one of the major IOCs for a substantial period of time. IOCs control a relatively modest share of the world's proven reserves. And I wonder how it is that, despite that fact, IOCs continue to play such a prominent role in the industry.
Yeah. I joined, this is a horrible story, but I joined Shell in 1971. And then the proven reserves of Shell were about 12 years. So I tried to explain that at my young wife at the time is that in 12 years I will be out. There's no job for me. And when I left Shell, we had still about Shell for 10 or 12 years proven reserves. But then it makes, and in the meantime, then when I came to office, there was a whole affair about bookkeeping regarding reserves in Shell. But if you take it in total, all the IOCs, whether they have 10 years of proven reserves or 12 or 15 years, that's about the longest, and some companies even shorter. Then you start to wonder, in order to be a successful enterprise, how important are proven reserves? Of course, fine if you have access to the stuff. But if you think, why are our IOCs, can they be successful? That is basically because they have a combination of technology, which is unique. They have the ability to build large projects and to take the risks to develop and to build those projects. And after that, they have operation excellence. That is to keep the cost low, to operate it very safely. Now, this combination of technology, project, skills, and operational excellence makes you if you are very good in that and better than the competition, then you are a very attractive partner for companies who have maybe proven reserves for 100 years. So that's the whole point. So it is great if you have some of your own stuff, but basically you must have a capability to differentiate yourself so people like to work with you. And so reserves is only one part of the story for the future success of an IOC. And there are those other three elements are absolutely key, in my view, to be successful.
Wonderful. Thank you. Chairman Fu, I wonder if you can talk to us about how China is going to grow its gas portfolio in the coming years, and what role in particular US LNG may play herein.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for the late coming. A lot of things concerning the next 20, 30 years, that one of the concerns is not where the gas is concerned and where the market. And especially when we look at China in the next 20, 30 years, especially we're thinking about the environmental issues, climate change issues. So clean energy, inevitably will be the first option selection in China. And currently, the gas consumption there is not much a big factor because of the lack of supply. And in the first primary consumption, energy consumption is only about 6% from gas, and 18 somewhere percent from oil, because oil price was low, and so import a lot more than before. And this is one of the reasons you see the coal consumption last year, even the year before last, was lower, slowed down, but because mainly the oil price is lower. And there's a tremendous resources, shale resources of gas there in China. However, this will take a long time to economically develop there in China, because all the gas play in a remote mountain area in the western part of China, and also buried a lot deeper than here, somewhere around 4,000 meters down below, and especially there's a lack of infrastructure. So it costs a lot higher than the shale gas here in US. So this will take time. And so when we look at the clean energy there, so we look a lot on the renewables. And with low oil price, we're somewhere around 50 or even $60 per barrel, and perhaps gas and the renewables will grow faster. And if there's a high oil price, somewhere $80, $100, and even faster with renewables. So the oil industry in China, maybe somewhere around the world, if the price come up to somewhere around $80, I think this is not so sustainable because of the renewables there. So gas as a consumption in China, I believe every year there's somewhere the growth rate of gas consumption is somewhere around 8 to 12%.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And US LNG fits in there, in your view?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Charif, last week you were at Gastech conference, so you got a lot of headlines there. When you announced you can deliver LNG into Japan at a fixed price for 5 years' time, would you mind sharing and telling more about this, please?
Well, I think before Tokyo, I was also at Dan's conference in Houston. And the critical thing is to try to, as in every business, find out what the customer wants and try to provide it to him. Mm-hmm. So the market has clearly indicated that they want to shorten the tenure of contracts. And the market has also clearly indicated that they like visibility and certain amount of certainty in terms of what their pricing is. Now, it doesn't mean that if the market gets what it wants, it's happy. But at least we started with that premise. So for us, the exercise was to say, okay, we can do the liquefaction as well as we can. We have some experience between Martin and myself, having done a number of trains around the world. And we're fairly confident that we understand our numbers on the liquefaction side, but that's not enough. The work that the producers are doing in the United States increases the savings every year dramatically compared to what we can do on the liquefaction side. So we came to the conclusion that the piece that we could have done better at Cheniere significantly was to source the gas cheaper. So on that basis, if we want to shorten the tenor, the most important piece is how long can you source the gas for at a price that you're comfortable, can be profitable for the producer and attractive to your customer. And then from there, we understand our liquefaction fairly well. And I think if you run a portfolio of ships, you can probably save a few cents. So you do a lot of savings along the line. You do a little bit on the shipping, a little bit by optimizing your liquefaction capacity. You watch in admiration as the producers continue to perform miracles. And you try to put the whole equation together, and we got to the place where we were comfortable securing something for 5 years. Remember, it's 5 years from today, so it's really, you have to take a view for 10 years. And we hope that this is responsive to what the customers want. So I think on $8, we have a reasonable return on investment. We can source the gas at an attractive price. We can finance our liquefaction capacity, and we can charter the ships to deliver to the different markets. So for Northern Asia, it equates to about $8.
All right, thank you. Question for both Jeroen and Tatiana. I think, so do you think that Europe going forward is going to pursue an energy transition strategy based on renewables plus coal, or do you think it will shift towards renewables plus natural gas?
Well, so far it looks like more like renewables plus coal, this energy vendor approach. At the same time, more and more I can hear from the European market participants criticism towards this approach. So the customers start to realize that something is going wrong and CO2 emissions are flat, they are not reducing, though the payments for electricity are actually going up. So they feel unhappy, and energy companies are also unhappy. So maybe at a certain point, European Union will start to review this policy. And then there is a window of opportunity for gas, but again, it's not granted. It will very much depend on the prices, first of all. So gas has to be competitive. If it will be $8 per MMBtu in Europe, then nothing will help. And at the same time, there should be also, I think, a positive political context, because a lot of this desire to get rid of gas in Europe is driven by geopolitical fears, first of all, of Russian gas, unfortunately. It is really driving many customers to a renewables plus coal formula.
Right.
Yeah, if you go back for after Kyoto, 1997, then Europe said we like to be the leaders in climate change, energy transition, and so on. And then the Europeans said to the Americans with this European finger, and you haven't signed Kyoto. Now, if you then look what happened over the last, say, 20 years, is that basically the coal consumption in Europe for electricity went up. And that is quite, and let's face it, if you burn that coal, it ends up in CO2. Sometimes politicians think this is a difficult thing to understand. So I live close to Rotterdam, and you see all the coal, basically the coal arriving partly from the US or partly from Australia. You see that has extended. And what happens with that coal, partly because there are new power stations in the Netherlands built based on coal, or it goes to Germany. And Germany, they have their own brown coal mines, and they provide jobs and so on. And say 20 years ago, the idea was that slowly those mines would close. That's hardly happened. So the facts are that the CO2 emissions, especially in the electricity generation in Europe, went up. Just the people who pretended to be the climate leaders, and the US, because they were backing out coal, and the natural gas or the shale gas, because it became cheaper. And especially in the last 10 years, the CO2 emission of the electricity power generation became less. So just the opposite. And then you think, oh, I knew that. But I have still to explain this very often to European politicians. Now, will this go on? that is then, so how are the coming 10 years? No, this will not go on, because there is no political space to build additional coal-fired power station, and some of the old stations has to close. It happens in the UK, in the Netherlands, they are talking about it. Germany, let's wait until the elections. Of course, the jobs issue plays a role. So basically the capacity to burn coal, irrespective more or less of the price, will decline. On top of that, I think it will take time, but one day you have either a price penalty on CO2, they call that the ETS, the European Trading System, or you get a carbon tax. But it is hard to see that if you take an horizon of 10 years, that CO2 you can just emit into the atmosphere basically without any penalty. Back to you, Tim.
Wonderful, thank you. Chairman Fu, I'd like to ask whether you think that, or if at all, the reversal or slowdown in US climate policy is going to affect Chinese policy going forward. Do you think that has an impact?
No, exactly, I don't think so. And, you know, this is during the Davos, and President Xi Jinping have make it clear that China will continue with the Paris climate change agreement. And one of the reasons that my understanding is that what they are doing, but China will go forward with it, because our people being hurt by pollution issues. One of the things was related with energy efficiency, with the discharge of pollutants and CO2. So CO2 is one of the things that we need to discharge less by improving our energy efficiency. So starting from this year, the whole China will start the CO2 trading. In the last 4 years, there's 7 provinces doing the 12 trading system. Now, starting from this year, the whole country will start the carbon trading. And then pricing and carbon tax will be followed. So this is something that we are looking at our own interest. That's our people, our health, our next generation health, we need this. So regardless what US is doing, but we have to do it.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you, thanks. Tatiana, we need an elevator pitch from you on Nord Stream 2. Does Gazprom need this pipeline? Does Europe need it? Do you think it will get built? And how will it affect the European market if it does?
Tim, you cannot even imagine how I hate this topic, frankly. I'm sick and tired speaking about it, but okay, I understand it's necessary. Well, look, if you look at this purely from the market perspective, we have Western Europe, which has suddenly lost 30 billion cubic meters of gas due to the sharp decline in the production at Groningen field in Netherlands. It was unexpected. They couldn't prepare. They just got these earthquakes and they had to freeze production, basically. And now they have to replace it. Okay, it could be done partially by LNG imports, though you have to build all this infrastructure, and 30 BCM, it's quite a big amount of regas terminals to be constructed. Or alternatively, you can expand the existing pipeline, which is Nord Stream 1, and there are companies interested to do this, and there are banks ready to finance it. So from the market perspective, that is something that should happen. What's the problem? So if somebody is ready to invest money to bring this gas, why should European Commission oppose? That's what you would think. But then you have to add on top of that all this political context. Ukraine, Poland, and transit through Ukraine and Poland and other East European countries, which probably would partially disappear because the capacity of Nord Stream 2 is more than 30 BCM, and then it could diverse some of the flows which are now going through Ukraine. And then immediately from a market-based project, it is becoming a political mess. And you have everybody struggling and competing and trying to postpone it, to freeze it. And I mean, it's no longer an economic discussion. Economically, it's justified. Costs are actually transit fee for transportation fee for Nord Stream 2 is nearly 2 times lower than the transit fee which Ukraine is now claiming from Gazprom. So again, from the market perspective, it looks like a reasonable project, but from the geopolitical point of view, and geopolitics matter for gas industry.
They do seem to matter, yes. Charif, question from the audience for you. Do you have any thoughts you want to share regarding the new IMO standards, shipping, and how it's going to create a market for natural gas?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Do you have any thoughts regarding the new IMO standards for sulfur emissions in shipping, and whether that's going to, shipping industry is going to, bunkering is going to emerge as a big market for natural gas going forward?
Yeah, probably, but God knows when. I mean, if gas is cheap on a global basis, then it makes a lot of sense to convert, but at the same time, and it's a very, very large market. But it's the same thing as the rest. The uncertainty scares you. So if you start converting a significant amount, it'll start probably, I mean, it should start economically in the US because that's where the gas is cheapest. But you start doing all the conversions and you convince the ship owners to do that over time. And if anything happens that goes wrong for some crazy reason, gas prices are going up again, that can be distressing. So I think it'll take time. Okay. But eventually the economic imperative is there. So I think the answer is yes. And to answer Tatiana's question is, frankly, I don't understand why it hasn't been built already. Looking at it from a rational sort of market-oriented point of view, even if it's competing with us, I think it's crazy not to build it.
I got another question. We're going to start with Jeroen, and then we come back to Charif. The question from the audience again is, in 10 years' time, will Shell or Tellurian be the dominant player in the market? And is there room for both types of companies? Jeroen, you can kick it off, and then we'll come back to Charif.
Oh, come on, that's an easy question. Tellurian, of course. No, I say that tongue-in-cheek. I think we have a very nice opportunity to do what we do, but Shell has been in business for many, many years and has been going through cycles for many, many years. They have a balance sheet that is very strong. They have a knowledge of markets that is very strong. They will manage risk extremely well. And hopefully we can go to be a portion of what Shell will be.
Well, I will be generous, Charif. If you are very big in the US, then Shell will be very big in the rest of the world. So,
deal.
I'm glad we sorted that. Chairman Fu, do you think there's a small scale market for smaller scale LNG, if you will, in China? Another question from the audience.
Sorry?
Do you think there is a market for smaller scale LNG in China?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And, in the past years, we tried both large scale and small scale and applications of LNG, especially for private sectors. They have developed small scale LNG technologies and transportation with cars, with boats, and so that they can deliver to remote area with a small tank. So this is developed very fast, and certainly there's also big LNG facilities for the receiving terminals along the coastal area. Mm-hmm. Actually, now China has a total capacity of receiving capacity is somewhere around 15 million tons per year.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Let's see the question. I think for Charif, but maybe others want to join in. If natural gas prices continue to fall and incremental production of electricity drops, will this drive a new economic boom in U.S. manufacturing? It's a question from the audience.
So what's the question?
If natural gas prices continue to fall, as the incremental production and loss of electricity drops, will this drive a new economic boom in the U.S. manufacturing sector?
Well, I think it's just not just the manufacturing sector. I think the amazing thing is on an ongoing basis, the United States will have $1 or less wellhead gas cost. That means that heating issues in Chicago will no longer be an issue. Electricity in homes will no longer be an issue. Manufacturing will no longer be an issue. So you see a lot of companies starting to invest in petrochemicals in the United States, companies that know better. And that's based on their view that natural gas will be affordable for a long period of time in the United States. So I think the availability of cheap energy in the United States will continue and will be very, very significant in terms of the growth of industrial production in the United States on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you. Jeroen, do you think that in the coming years we'll see Iran emerge as a major player in the global gas market, or you think it's going to be predominantly regional?
Iran? Yeah. Now, first, let me make an addition to Charif about the industry. Is that it depends what you see as manufacturing industry, but when I was working in the US, we were very concerned that basically the chemical industry, due to too high feedstock prices, would the base chemicals would have very difficult in the US, and there was some. It is a complicated story, but to keep it simple, there was some cheap feedstock, but it was a limited amount because that was co-production with other things. And but what you see now is that there are all kinds of plans to make new chemical crackers in the US. And of course, if you build them here, then they are not built somewhere else. But what is the interesting thing is, if you build a chemical cracker, you get a lot of products out of it. And usually what happens with those products, that is not an end product, but it goes to manufacturing people. They make parts for the car industry or for your house or whatever it is. So yes, it does have, to having cheap energy has certainly quite what is called a macroeconomic multiplier on other industries. And let me stop there. The question of Iran is, I think there was a kind of very optimistic thinking about a year when there was the new agreements with Iran, and that their industry would take off very soon. Now, at this moment, it goes all a bit slower. Now, why is this? Why is that? Now, first, what it is not. Iran has huge, what we called in the earlier discussion, reserves. The access to the Pars field is an incredible big gas field. There are many other resources, by the way, oil as well. So it is not that Mother Nature has not been nice to Iran. In fact, Mother Nature has been very nice to Iran because they have a lot and you can produce it cheaply. Secondly, there are huge markets which cry for a supply of gas. Think about Pakistan, think about India. And if you look at the map, they are very nearby. Now, we may have political problems in Europe, Tatiana, but the whole reason is that you could have made a gas pipeline from Iran to India. So 2,500 years ago, there was a general called Alexander. He could walk that with his whole army. Now, then we can make nowadays a pipeline the other way. That's not, let's say, technically or even economically, that's straightforward. But for all the political reasons you can dream up yourself, it hasn't happened. Now, that will happen. That will be a huge outlet for Iran. That's one. Secondly, Iran is, of course, looking at LNG and maybe gas to liquids for instance, Far Eastern markets. That would be very logical. That would be win-wins. Or even they will have the same capability as Qatar if you look at their potential cost profiles. Now, so far, the Iranians, they come not as quickly back to the world scene. There are all kinds of problems that has to do with payments via banks, how it works. I have the sanctions really lifted. And by the way, the Iranians are pretty tough negotiators as well. So what I say, what I expect is, yes, Iran will come back. I think it will go at a relative low speed. So always when you look at long-term balances of gas supply or oversupply, the first thing I always do, what have they assumed for Iran? And then usually I think that may be a bit optimistic, but it will happen.
Thank you. Chairman Fu, I wonder if you want to share any thoughts on a recent initiative by Chinese, Korean, and Japanese companies to form, if you will, a buyers club in the procurement of LNG. Is that significant? What does that mean? Is that important?
I think that will be a difficult one. You know, when I was running CNOOC, this is over 10 years ago, we tried this way. We had a meeting we call NOCs in Asia meeting in order to reduce, we call the East Asia, like something we pay more oil per dollar than rest of the world. And those premiums and also being applied in the gas LNG sector. So we tried very hard to get together, see whether or not we combine to buy either oil or the LNGs. But the company, no problem. Business sees it's good. When this applied to the government, there's a certain regulations on each different country, and they're causing some problems. But initiatives being agreed by everyone, but in applying to the actuals, to apply to their policies of each country, they're causing some problems, that including import-export tax. So I think this is a right direction, but need the government to work together with this.
Okay, wonderful. I regret to say that we're slowly running out of time. As much, and I like how much you like to predict what's going to happen tomorrow and in the future. So that's why I want to give you each a minute to tell the audience what you think they need to watch going forward the next year or two. We'll start with Charif. I'm going to work our way up.
I think the emergence of a very liquid market and the business model that will result from it. I think today if you put a willing buyer and a willing seller together and put them in a room and say you can't get out until you figure out how to do this, they won't be able to agree on a pricing mechanism that satisfies both. And I think that is the most critical thing that's going to happen in the gas business in the next few years.
Yep. Thank you. Tatiana?
Well, actually, I'll get back to our paper which we wrote on the new global gas order, because I really have a feeling that there is all this huge quantity of smaller changes which are accumulating and driving some major change in the nature of the natural gas market. And it is really becoming much more liquid. It is becoming much more flexible and adaptive, and it puts very strong requirements on the suppliers, first of all, to be really efficient in every part of the supply chain, as you said, to be very competitive, to be really thinking about the customers, hunting for smaller niches, hunting for new innovative solutions, because look, there are so many areas where the gas industry haven't yet proposed any solutions, and there is a lot of space to do. And so I don't think that this is the end of the gas. It is just the beginning of the new gas order.
Thank you. Jeroen, final thought?
Yeah, if I would come back in 30 years from now, then the code words how the gas industry will look like is, for me, spaghetti and ships. Let me explain that. If you would sit in a satellite and you take a photograph of Western Europe and you take all the pipelines there, that look all the gas pipelines, is already looks like spaghetti. But the spaghetti is basically Western Europe. You have a bit around the Gulf of Mexico and then the connection to the shale gas. But if you come back in 30 years, you will have spaghetti in the Middle East. You have spaghetti starting probably in Iran, the Indian way. I'm convinced that the whole east coast of China will be full of spaghetti of gas pipelines. So, and then Nord Stream will happen, Turkish Stream will happen. It takes a bit of time, but the world will be full of spaghetti gas, as Charif said this morning. And the second business which grows very fast is basically LNG. LNG growth is going on, and we get large provinces like Tanzania and Mozambique and so on, so complete new provinces. And that will not go away with pipelines. So you get many more LNG ships.
Yep.
That is my wish for the future generation, that maybe you can help either with the spaghetti or with the ships.
Thank you. Chairman Fu, the final word is yours, and then we have to end.
Okay, as a conventional gas supplier or the player, and we should watch out closely about the technology progress that might impact on the two areas. One is will sharply drive down the cost of the renewables. And second, on the consumption area, there may be changes of the way of the consumption, which I mean there's a more efficient distribution system will come out.
Thanks very much. Please join me in thanking this great panel. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.